here a little later. So I don't think it's any secret to people who've been following what we've been doing over many years that Florida is a law and order state. It's something that we understand is important. We know that that is the way to improve and maintain a high quality of life. We looked at some of these other states that were going at it in a different direction over many, many years, and we never budged from our commitment to law enforcement and to making sure we had strong public safety. But I do think it's interesting to just kind of look back and think about, where was the debate in this country, say 6 or 7 years ago? The debate was largely about releasing criminals, and you had different iterations of that in different parts of the country. You had people that wanted to reduce the amount of time people needed to serve when they committed crimes. You had movements to eliminate bail so that people didn't have to even post bail, they just get released. And then, of course, you saw the BLM riots, you saw attacks on law enforcement, you saw movements to defund the police. And we can say definitively, any jurisdiction, city, state, that indulged in that during that period of time, 6, 7 years ago to the present, that those forays, those policy forays failed. And they failed miserably. And they failed in ways that have harmed an awful lot of people. I mean, who would think that you would have these district attorney candidates running for office around the country pledging to not enforce the law against people that are dangerous? And then that gets them more funding by people like George Soros, if you can believe it or not. But that was happening, and we had examples in Florida, and I'm the only governor that's removed Soros prosecutors from office because I understand it's a threat to public safety and you got to do your job. But if you think about, okay, releasing people early, that has failed. Not having bail, cash bail, that has failed. They tried to do that in Florida. Miami-Dade County, somehow the chief judge of the circuit was putting forward this thing to basically mimic New York and Illinois. We got wind of that, and let's just say that died a very sudden death because we weren't going to let it happen in Florida. So that didn't happen. There were, when I was first governor, there were proposals in the legislature to water down penalties, let people out. We squashed that big time. Then, of course, we had the BLM, the Summer of Love, 2020. You had massive rioting across the United States of America. We were very clear, that's not going to fly here. You can have your whatever political things you want to do. The minute that you go into disorder, chaos, looting, mob violence, you're going to have hell to pay in the state of Florida. And so not only did we back law enforcement during that, I mean, you remember these politicians were like protesting, bending knee, going out there doing all this. It was basically virtue signaling. But the implications of those positions were very dangerous. So we stood firm on that. You did not see Minneapolis happen in places in Florida. And we were proud of it. Then we did legislation to say that we are going to make sure that if you loot, if you're rioting, if you're engaging in mob violence, even if it's a liberal judge, you're not going to get a slap on the wrist like they do in Portland. They riot in Portland, they slap them on the wrist, put them out, just do it again. Oh, okay, then do it. What purpose does that serve? That doesn't deter anything. So for us, we said very simply, if you do those things, you're going to jail. And that's just what's going to happen. And as a result of that, people they know the inmates don't run the asylum, and so that has a strong deterrent effect. We also said we're not going to allow you to commandeer roads for your political agenda. And this is something that I really believe very strongly that we have to draw a very hard red line against. I don't care what your cause is, to take over a road and make people wait in traffic, that doesn't fly. First of all, it defeats the purpose. Even if someone had sympathy with you, they have to wait in traffic. And then you may have an ambulance that needs to get through. You may need to have police. You may need to have someone needs to pick up kids. There's all kinds of issues. So I just can't understand why they've allowed that in other parts of the country. So we did that. We made sure, and you as a motorist have a right to not have a mob come descend on your vehicle. You have a right to get out of Dodge if they're doing that to you, because they surround the cars. The people driving the car would stop because they're trying to be considerate of the mob, and then the mob would drag them out of the driver's seat and start beating them to a pulp. Well, nobody should have to deal with that. You have a right to defend yourself here in Florida. But then when they did the Hamas protest a few years ago, they're taking over bridges in New York, taking over streets in LA, all these things. They tried to go to a street in Miami, and they lasted 13 minutes and they got dragged off the street. They tried to do it in Orlando. They got 11 minutes and our highway patrol yanked them. And so we're just not tolerating the nonsense, but it makes a huge difference for the quality of life of folks, and we understand. Incidentally, you hear about some of these people that are moving to Florida from some of these different places where they think a little bit different here. Some of these people have a lot of money. Listen, we don't want that stuff, that way of thinking, imported into the free state of Florida. We want to continue doing what works, and we don't want to see those failed experiments brought here, however way you slice it. People need to look, and they need to look at the scoreboard. They need to look what's worked and what hasn't worked. And so you have all this backdrop of all this stuff. What has that meant for Florida? Crime rate's at a 50-year low. And it's not just the really bad criminals that we lock up. We've been doing, unfortunately, we've got people that have committed some really, really heinous crimes, and that's led to capital punishment. And so as governor, I have to oversee these executions, and it takes a long time because they go through all these appeals, and the courts have said they have to go through federal and state and everything, so they go through this process. It takes a long, but then at some point they're ready. And I started talking to some of the families, and they were just very upset about how long it takes. And I just thought to myself, I don't want to be part of this problem. If they've gone through this and they're there and they've committed these heinous crimes, I have a responsibility to make sure we're processing those. And so we've processed a lot in the last year or two for sure, but that gives relief to a lot of the families. I was out, I'm not going to say which part of the state, but I was out, and I'm like talking to people. We think we were going to do an event or whatever, and someone was like, "Hey, this one would like to talk to you." And I look very sad-faced, very almost like it seemed like a little agitated. I thought she was mad at me. I was like, "Oh man, what did I do now?" But she just gave me a hug, and she said, one of the other governors had said they were going to do this and they never did it, and you signed it, and finally we're going to get justice. So that matters too. I think it should be done quicker, but I think ultimately the courts have created that mess on there. So we've done that as well. But even smaller crimes, it was interesting. You'll have these places like you go to a drugstore in some of these cities and it's all under lock and key. It's like I need deodorant and I gotta have them unlock the safe to buy this. It's like toothpaste, really? And so you see that San Francisco, a lot of the stores just eventually closed because they legalized theft. You could steal, as long as you didn't steal 1,000, you could steal, and they basically wouldn't hold you accountable. So you have criminals that are just looting these stores left and right. Well, we did the strongest retail theft package against retail theft of any state in the country, real teeth in our laws, and especially so that some liberal judge just can't let people out with a slap on the wrist. And I'll tell you, a lot of businesses were excited about that, but it's more than just the value of the property that's being stolen from the businesses. It's the quality of life. When you have all this become commonplace and they let you commit these crimes, it causes a whole host of other problems. And so we believe in even the small stuff. You're going to try to yank some toothpaste? No, we're not going to let you do that either. I mean, we're not going to do it. So we've done that, and those are some of the strongest laws anywhere in the country. So I'm happy about that, and I think it's part of the reason why you have a 50-year low in the crime rate. When New York City was spinning out of control before Giuliani got in, they started focusing on small crimes, and that created a culture that led them to also reduce the big crimes. We've never tolerated any of it, but I do think having this extra emphasis that we've done on the retail theft, and the proof's in the pudding. There was a report on CNN, this is probably now a couple years ago at this point, there was a theft gang. I think they were here illegally as well, but they would steal all this stuff, sell the merchandise in New York. And then they would take the money, the proceeds, they would travel to Florida and party in Florida as spend, and then they'd go back to New York, steal, and then come back. And so the CNN person was like, I don't understand. Why don't you just stay in Florida and steal there? Why do you come back up here to New York? And they said, because they put you in jail in Florida, that's why. And so that is a lot of lead up to just say we've proofs in the pudding. We put our money where our mouth is. We haven't just come and at election time and tried to say we're for law enforcement. We actually have enacted major policies that are, quite frankly, the envy of the nation when you look at it. Now, part of it is compensating people, making sure that they're able to be recruited and retained. And we've been able to do a lot for our state law. Now, we don't fund at the state level the county or the city, but we fund our state, our highway patrol. We fund Florida Department of Law Enforcement. We've done major pay increases in recent years, 10% just this current year increase for all entry level, and 15% for people that have 5 years of service. And I actually wanted to do more. Maybe we'll get more when the legislature gets around to doing the budget, and they're not doing it on time when it's due tomorrow. But hopefully, hope springs eternal, and they'll get that done. But we may even be able to do more for that. So that's something that's very, very meaningful. But one thing that we said that we would be able to do, because I was looking around the country, I remember being out in California a couple years ago, and I get there, I get greeted by the chief of police at one of the meetings, and he's a very, very good guy, very, very good area too, like historically, people would recognize. And, oh, great to have you here, Governor, all this. I was like, well, how are you doing? I'm doing great. How are your police officers doing? Oh, they're doing good. They just all want to move to Florida now because of what you guys are doing. Now, think about it. It's just, that would have been, people used to want to go to California. Now, they're like, because of the way they were treated. Seattle, treated horribly by the politicians. New York City, some of these places, just awful treatment. And part of it is like, why are you going to bust your rear end, wear a uniform, risk your life, and then just have these politicians trash you, create this hostile environment? So there was a lot of people that wanted to either, some of them just wanted to get out of law enforcement, but we figured, a lot of them probably would be interested in coming to Florida. So we enacted a bonus program where anyone new recruits, and some of it is recruiting these out-of-state officers, but also young people in Florida that go through the police academy are also eligible. We created a program to do a $5,000 signing bonus. And the goal is to try to recruit people who want to be part of law enforcement and can help keep our community safe. So we did that several years ago. We've been highlighting different successes on that. But today was a really, really great milestone that we're able to announce. And so since we did this program a few years ago, we've now been able to award 10,000 of our signing bonuses to law enforcement throughout the state of Florida. That's a really, really big deal. We also did during COVID, they were sending all this money, which quite frankly I didn't need, and because we were open and our economy was doing good. But if you sent it back, they would just give it to another state. So I'm like, I'm going to use it. So what can I do? So we did, I think 3 years in a row, we did a $1,000 bonus for every single sworn law enforcement and firefighter and EMT in the entire state of Florida. That's a lot of people. They're getting, we're having to send these checks out. They're getting the checks. And anytime we say we do bonus, that's what you get after tax. So the $5,000 is $5,000 in your pocket. We also fund whatever it would cost for the taxes on top of that. That was true for the $1,000. It's also true for the $5,000. So we did, I think, 3 years in a row where we did the bonuses for our police officers regardless, just every, and then also the $5,000 recruit. I'll tell you, for both of those, look, $5,000 is helpful. $1,000 is helpful, but I mean, man, just think of the inflation we've seen in this country over the last 5 or 6 years. It ain't what it used to be, but it's helpful, not life-changing. But I think a lot of these guys would tell me it wasn't even that they got the money. Yeah, it's helpful to have some more money. It was just the state of Florida thought as much. Governor, I think I signed these checks. We figured out a way to do that. That they thought enough to send us this, because they certainly weren't doing that in these other jurisdictions. They were treating them poorly in those jurisdictions. So it just shows you the state believes in the mission. Our bonus program shows that the state thinks it's a noble calling. And then a lot of the communities around Florida, very supportive of law enforcement. I know here in Southwest Florida, communities are very pro law enforcement. They understand the importance. They understand what it means to quality of life. So we're doing what I think the folks expect and are thankful for. So 10,000 is a lot. I'm really excited to be able to mark this milestone here today. We'll see if this program gets continued in the current budget. I think it should. I think you talk to sheriffs, and this is for any level of law enforcement. So a sheriff can do the 5,000. A police chief can give it to a new recruit. Our state agencies, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, they can give it to new recruits. So that's pretty significant to be able to have that tool when you're trying to recruit. It used to be, you go back 20, 30 years, you have sheriff, particularly in some of these rural, you'd have sheriff department. If there was a deputy opening, you'd have like 50 people applying, 100 people for one. Times have changed a little bit. I think we've made law enforcement something people want to be a part of in Florida and ensured that. But you have seen just different currents in society over these many years, and things are a little bit different. It's not as easy to recruit as it would have been decades ago. So we're helping do that, and I think we've had some really good people. Now, look, 10,000 of them, I don't know if any of them have buyer's remorse, but I can tell you none of the recipients that I've ever talked to have buyer's remorse. They are all glad that they made the trip to be in the free state of Florida and work in law enforcement agencies throughout our state. And I think that says a lot about the way we do business here that people will do. And most of them will say they're glad, they are best decision they've ever made, and they would not change it for the world. So that's just not me giving checks out that's causing that. That's a culture that's been created here at our agencies and the county level, the city level, the community involvement and community support. We're doing it right in Florida, and we want to keep that going. So thank you for everyone who's been involved in this. 10,000 bonus checks is huge. That's a lot of money in terms of that. I think, like I said, because of the taxes that we pay, the total cost is not just 10,000 times 5,000, so it's more than that. So it's about 67 million that has been paid out. A good, decent chunk of that is us paying your taxes for you, so you get the $5,000 straight to your pocket. So good job, everybody. Thanks to folks in the legislature that have supported this over the years, and thanks to everybody that's been willing to do this. Okay.